Good evening, everyone. My name is Renat Stenbach. I am one of the interpreters with MARB Service Languages. We're going to offer interpretation, but first I will explain in Creole, then Spanish with Maria and Camilo. Premièrement, je vais dire que nous avons offert interprétation aujourd'hui parce que nous voulons assurer que tout le monde ait accès à l'information qui est très important, quelle que soit la langue que nous parlons. Alors, nous allons utiliser un petit appareil. Partie ça, c'est pour nous mettre par des oreilles nous, et partie ça, c'est pour nous capables de camber et sous côté, nous avons un bouton, nous avons lumière et nous avons une lumière rouge qui paraît. Ensuite, nous avons demandé nous si nous capables pour nous capables lever main nous sous capable parce que pas tout le monde qui a une possibilité et yon nan nous a porter appareil là ban nous. Alors on va faire nos signes, n'a porter appareil là. Ensuite, n'a demandé interprète yo tout et pas interprète yo alors et moun qui fait présentation yo puis on parle doucement. Des fois nous qu'on fait signe pour nous demander pour ralentir, mais cette fois-ci nous pas sûr que n'a pour nous pas derrière. Alors si nous besoin pour nous capable aller plus lentement, n'a fait nos signes. D'accord? Je vais passer nous là by Maria qui va offrir interprétation en espagnol.
Buenas tardes, buenas noches. Mi nombre es María Angélica, mis pronombres son ella y ellex y hoy estamos proveyendo interpretación en criollo haitiano, en español y también reconociendo a nuestras colegas que están haciendo lenguaje de signos americana. Estamos proveyendo interpretación para asegurarnos de que todos tengamos acceso a la conversación de hoy sin importar el idioma que hablamos. Hoy vamos a proveer interpretación usando dispositivos. Si ustedes quisieran y les es posible levantar su mano para escuchar este programa en criollo haitiano o en español, por favor déjenoslo saber y con gusto les proveeremos un dispositivo. Muchas gracias. Good afternoon, good evening. My name is Maria Angelica. My pronouns are she and they, and today we will be providing interpretation in Haitian Creole and Spanish with MARB Language Services, and also acknowledging the presence of our wonderful ASL interpreter colleagues in order to make sure that we can participate in this conversation tonight, regardless of the language that we speak. So if you would like to listen to today's program in Spanish or in Creole, please raise your hand if you're able at any point during the program, and we will provide you with a device so that you can listen to it in real time. And a loving reminder to our speakers today to please pace yourselves as we are all interpreting you in real time, and we want to make sure to interpret everything that you're saying. Thank you so much.
Okay, good evening. Good evening, everyone. Welcome. Welcome to the Perez Art Museum, Miami. It's really wonderful to be with you tonight here. Thank you, everyone who is joining us, both in the audience here in real life and everyone on YouTube joining virtually. My name is Marie Vickles. I'm the Director of Education, and I am delighted to introduce our second program of the 2021 Scholl Lecture Series, featuring artist Bisa Butler in conversation with PAM Director Franklin Sermons. For tonight's program, Bisa and Franklin will be discussing how her work celebrates Black life and invites a reimagining of contemporary dialogue around age-old issues that are still problematic in our culture, all done through the comforting and embracing medium of the quilt. They will discuss how she uses her work to express and emphasize her deep-rooted belief in the equal value of all human beings. A few acknowledgments before we get started. A special thank you to Deborah and Dennis Scholl for your ongoing support of this important lecture series. We appreciate you. And I would be remiss if I did not also thank the incredible team of people working so very hard to produce our PAM education programs. I would like to acknowledge Anita Bram, Associate Director of Adult and Public Programs, Janessa Melendez, Education Coordinator, and our world-class audiovisual team, Denise Faxis, Andrew Bird, and Lazaro Yanes on video and cameras. We literally could not do this without you, so thank you so much. Clap it up. Okay, let's get this program started with introductions of our featured speakers. Bisa Butler. Born in Orange, New Jersey, the daughter of a college president and a French teacher. She was raised in South Orange and is the youngest of 4 siblings. Formally trained, Bisa graduated from Howard University with a bachelor's in fine art. She began to experiment with fabric as a medium and became interested in collage techniques. Bisa earned a master's in art from Montclair State University in 2005 and was a high school art teacher for 10 years at Newark Public Schools and 3 years at Columbia High School in Maplewood, New Jersey. I also think that deserves a clap. In February 2021, Bisa was awarded a United States Artist Fellowship, and her work was recently the focus of the solo exhibition entitled Portraits at the Art Institute of Chicago, the second stop of this traveling exhibit, which began at the Katona Museum of Art. Numerous institutions and museums have acquired Bisa Butler's work, including the Art Institute of Chicago, Museum of Fine Arts Boston, Nelson Adkins Museum, Kemper Museum of Art, Orlando Museum of Art, Newark Museum, Toledo Museum of Art, Minneapolis Institute of Art, Hunter Museum of American Art, the Los Angeles County Museum of Art, and most recently, the Perez Art Museum, Miami, with the acquisition, woo, yes. Yes, and with the acquisition of her exquisite work, Black is King, purchased with funds provided by the PAM Collectors Council. This work is currently on view in our galleries, so please make sure to see it if you haven't already. Franklin Sermons, director of the Perez Art Museum Miami since 2015, is an internationally recognized art critic, editor, writer, and curator. Franklin has established himself as one of the leading voices in contemporary art, joining Pam from his previous post at the Los Angeles County Museum of Art, LACMA, where he held the position as department head and curator of contemporary art. In his time at the Perez Art Museum Miami, he has facilitated the acquisition of more than 1,000 works of art by donation or purchase, and has pursued, yes, clap it up, and has pursued his vision of Pam as the People's Museum. Now, in his 6th year of leading Miami's flagship art museum, Franklin continues to write and edit for numerous publications, making a compelling impact on the world of contemporary art. So at the end of tonight's program, we will have a short moment for questions. So if you are joining us on YouTube, please post your questions in the comments section. And if you're in the audience, just raise your hand. We'll have microphones going around, and we'll try to get to everyone. But remember, after tonight's program, join us on the terrace outside for an amazing playlist by DJ John Butler. It's going to be so great. We'll be out there. Yes. One last little bit of housekeeping. If you can squeeze into the rows just a little bit for latecomers, thank you so much. Appreciate that. Yes. All right. So, without further ado, please join me in giving a warm welcome to Bisa Butler and Franklin Sermons.
Shall I start us off? Let's see. Hello, you on? Yes, you're on.
Okay. Hello.
Hey. Well, first off, I'm surprised that I didn't hear a, it's you. It was inevitable with our better halves.
Definitely, without a doubt. Howard's in the house.
God, it's so good to be in here and to see so many people in here. It's still a little bit hard to see everybody's face with the mask, but we're getting there, and that's a beautiful place to be. Bisa, thank you so much for being here with us this evening. Thank you for taking the time. Thank you for making the work. And thank you for that incredible, incredible artwork that we have downstairs.
Thank you. Thank you. It's my pleasure. Absolutely.
Thank you. We're going to talk about that a little bit and some other things. I also just want to thank our staff, incredible staff, and our incredible board. That makes all of these things possible. And also, with the piece in mind, I want to make a special thank you to our curators and our collectors council, because it wouldn't be here without that. thank you all so much.
Thank you very, very much. I'm honored. Thank you.
Also, I been thinking about the work, and we've had the opportunity to trade some emails and see each other during Basel. And,
Yes.
I mean, I feel like I have a special chord because of our respective partners.
Yes.
It's an absolute delight to be here with you, and I want to, we have images. We're gonna try and we kind of talked about. We're just gonna see where we go with it. Right?
Yes. Let's make it natural.
and plus, you were on CBS Evening News last night.
Yes, I was.
Thank you again for being here.
It's my pleasure. The evening news is fantastic because everybody gets about a minute and 30 seconds to see everything.
Amazing, and that does touch on so many aspects of your work, I think. I would just like to begin with a sort of beginning of sorts.
Sure.
How do we get here?
How do we get here? How does it all begin? Well, as we all know, it begins at home, right?
Yes.
And my parents were very supportive. I'm the youngest of 4. So by the time I rolled around, they were just pretty much willing to accept whatever it was going to be. The expectations had changed, and I was indulged and allowed to be creative since I was a little girl. When I was telling somebody else, when I was like 3, I thought I was it. Like, I knew I was talented. Now, I don't know if my little 3-year-old scribbles looked any different than anybody else's, but I believed those compliments. So when you tell your little ones, like, oh, that's really nice, like, I believed it. I took it to heart.
So you were encouraged from a very early start.
A very early start.
Fantastic.
I was Artist of the Month in preschool. Yep, I'm proud. Sundance Preschool.
So that was the beginning. I mean, we mentioned the fact of obviously moving on to Howard, and you had to have a supportive environment.
Absolutely.
In order to get to that point. What was it like to go to Howard University?
Going to Howard when I was there, I think I should show an image. Now, let me see. I was shown how to do this, and please forgive if I am not correct. Okay, yes.
Perfect.
So this is an image of a painting that I did in class at Howard on my right. So I guess that would be your left, right? Yes, okay. So we used to have a typical arts class format. There's a model in the middle of the room and you're painting. But I paired this image with an image of one of my professor's work, Wadsworth Jarrow, from Afrocobra, the African Commune of Bad and Relevant Artists. So Afrocobra, most of the painting faculty, including the Dean of Fine Arts, Jeff Donaldson, as you know, came out of Afrocobra. So they came strong. They had their own manifesto already. Black art was supposed to be for liberation and for uplifting. And they were very philosophical, as you know. It's like when you look at the older films of SNCC and the student activists, how educated they were, how trained they were, and how they had these high ideals. So the Afrocobra artists came out of the 60s, and they were like, Black art should uplift people. It should be for liberation. It should not necessarily be about making money. When Black people look at your art, they should feel good, and they should feel acknowledged that they're beautiful. The whole Black is beautiful thing. Black hair, full lips, skin that attracts melanin or has melanin. And so these are my professors. So I knew right away, that I was given a task and a responsibility. We didn't really have that luxury, like just make art.
Right.
Art for art's sake, which I'm sure was, as far as I can recall, was really big in the 60s amongst non-black artists. You know, explore color, explore shape. And not that they didn't do that, but they felt that the people were in such dire straits, right? Afro-Cobra formed in 1968, which was basically like 2020, right? They were watching all that violence on the TV.
Absolutely.
They were watching people be killed and brutalized in their neighborhoods, so they were like, we have to respond to this. You don't have the luxury to sit back. And so they impressed that upon us. So what you're seeing is my painting on the right, and then Wadsworth Jarrell's painting. So this is the art that I was trained looking at. Within his artwork, I think there are words within it that I can't read right now, but they are about Black liberation. So that, in class, that's what we were tasked with.
It's an amazing thing for you to be a part of that kind of generation.
Yeah.
But I also think of there's the history there that puts you there with Jeff is one that also before that has someone like Alois Mailou Jones,
right?
Who I'm sure you learned from in terms of.
I was obsessed with Lois Mailou Jones. I spent at least a year just copying her artwork because she was that good, and that African influence in her work, and the colors and the shapes. I didn't yet know how to express myself, but I knew that I wanted to be in the vein of them.
It's interesting with her, just in mind, is that, she also has ties going back to the 1920s, 1930s.
Right.
And so there's this reference to almost a period where, she came to those concerns late, right? Yeah. Like she wasn't in your position. She didn't have somebody teaching necessarily that approach, which is really fascinating because it also hints at how deep the depth is around Howard University as a seat of art and a seat of art history in this country.
Yeah, so. That she had to come upon those symbols traveling in Africa. She couldn't just open up a book and copy it like I was doing. Yeah.
Wadsworth, Jarrell, Afro-Cobra, Jeff Donaldson, a lot of them are working with painting specifically. Yes. And I think that's the way we talk about your work, right? When we talk about the paintings in the gallery, knowing full well that there's a materiality there that might be a little bit different. So I'm curious, as someone who felt confident with, say, drawing and painting even, how did you find your medium?
That happened at Howard, and I'm going to show the next image. It was very important to have that input from my professors. And I was struggling in painting. I know the painting that you saw on the other slide, it didn't look bad, but I didn't feel that I was seeing anything different or special or individualistic. I was doing what they told me to do. And Al Smith, who taught painting I approached him after class and was like, I'm struggling. Everybody to the left and to the right of me are, in my opinion, really dope. And my work was just like formulaic. I do what you tell me to do. Like I said, I copied Lois Jones. I could copy anything. Yeah. I could paint very realistically. And Al was like, look at how you dress. Use you in your artwork. I don't see you. Look at Romare Bearden. Look at the collages and incorporate that in your artwork. So this is my first and I think only self-portrait that I painted in 1993. Wow. And I was in undergrad, and this was like at the behest of Al Smith. Like, yes, okay, you still have to paint, but I want to see you. So I was gluing fabric onto the canvas. And
so as early as this piece?
As early as that. It was still awkward. Dealing with canvas was difficult for me. Dealing with the materials and trying to smooth it out with glue was difficult for me, but I didn't understand yet what could be done. But this is like the very beginning. I like this piece because it's like the missing link between painting and then quilting.
Yeah, I didn't even think about the connections with some of the other members of Afro-Cobra who were working almost in a way with fashion as a
Yes.
point of departure.
The J. Jarrell.
Exactly.
I got a chance to meet her when their show opened at opened at Mokonomi, right?
Yeah.
But
2 years ago.
Yeah,
2
2
years ago.
years, 3 years.
COVID time.
COVID. I met them in Brooklyn, and she was talking to me about how her parents were tailors and how that influenced her artwork. And it was just so cool to be with another woman artist who also expressed themselves using fibers.
So this is 93. You graduated in 95.
Yes, I graduated in 95.
And they were here.
And then we're here, boom. But there's a jump. There's no more canvas. There's no more glue. There's no more paint. None of that. This is my grandparents, Dr. Francis Hammond and Violet Hammond. And this was just a little tiny photo that you take like in a photo booth in the 1930s in New Orleans where they were married. And this is before. My grandfather ended up being a U.S. emissary to Morocco. They had 10 kids, American kids, and they raised them all in Africa. But this is before the 10 kids, before the drama, before the fights, anybody who's married, disagreements, none of those things. Like, so you could still see their eyes are like so fresh.
True.
I mean, after 10 kids, I don't know how fresh your gaze is. And I decided to make this portrait for my grandmother, Violet. So you see all the purple violets. This was a project in grad school.
Okay.
I went to Montclair State. There was a female-run program put together in the 70s. And so this is almost like Howard's art program with AfroCobra, but with a women's liberation movement of the 70s, primarily white women professors saying, we need to have fibers as a part of the requirements to graduate. And so I went back to school to teach, but I was missing that fibers requirement, so I had to take it.
Okay.
And thank God.
That's amazing.
Because it was just an assignment. This is my final assignment for class. What do you want to do? You could felt, knit, crochet. You could do surface design. We did a quilt, and I was like, all right, I'll do a quilt. And that was the moment.
Wow. So an assignment drew you further into this idea of using material in this way.
Absolutely.
In that moment, I'm trying to think, like, we think about Sheila Hicks, we think about other artists who use textiles, and I think in some ways now it's like Mark Bradford, Deirdre Brackens, artists who, like yourself, where we don't necessarily make that distinction. We think about the work and overall as a painting practice.
Right.
But at that time, what were you like? What were you inspired by?
Oh man! First of all, when I entered the fiber studio, it was primarily women. So the vibe was very different. Everybody was sitting at a long table, and so there was this communal aspect. You're not sitting at separate easels around the room in your little bubble, and instead of the stacks of books, there were stacks of yarn, like stacks and stacks and stacks. So it was warm in the room. There was sunlight. I don't know, but when I entered there, I felt like safe space. Wow. And I felt like this is where I belong. Right away, I started just doing my own thing because that was the moment. I was like, oh, I got this. Yeah. Like, I already had been making clothes, so I can quilt, I can make portraits, I can focus on the people who I love. This portrait was for my grandmother as a gift because her health was failing. Okay. She needed, I think she needed dialysis or possibly a kidney transplant, but after a certain age, they don't give you one. And so I knew that I was going to lose her, and I wanted her to know that I loved her, and I was thankful for everything she had done for me. So the bits of fabric in here are like her remnants from sewing, some of her clothing, some of my grandfather's suits. So it was like I was using what she left me, her remnants, to create something for her, and she used to lay it over her legs in her sickbed. So
It also brings up that idea of being utilitarian. It's something
Yes.
that's useful in some ways.
Yes.
Maybe more. Maybe we think about that more so than the way we think about a traditional painting. Obviously.
Yes, I think that this is what I needed and what she needed. There's something about touching your work, the softness of it, and then also you're dealing with, like, quilting. You're traditional quilters,
Yeah.
especially African American.
Yeah.
We had what we had, which was leftover things, and so that's exactly what I was using. Those are the things from the people you love. So when I opened, my grandmother was a Depression era person. Her fabric was wrapped in plastic. So when I opened it, her perfume scent was on it.
Wow.
So as I'm using her fabric, I'm smelling my grandmother's essence, and I'm remembering her wearing those things. So it was healing for me. And I think it was, I don't know if I would say it was healing for her, but I know that she was really proud in those last days.
You talked about coming to the material in a somewhat of an art historical sense at first, right?
Yes.
And then finding a personal connection.
Yeah.
Were you already aware of the, like, say, Quilters of G's Bend at this point?
Yes. Oh, I'm glad you mentioned that. I went to that show. It opened at the Whitney, New York, 2004. When I saw those quilts on the wall, they were elevated. They were big like these slides. Well, to me, they were big, maybe half the size. And they were up. And so as I'm walking through this big, beautiful museum and I'm seeing this artwork, I thought at that moment, I was still in grad school, I was like, I can do it. I didn't know that those women were not wealthy. I thought they were super rich, famous artists. You have your show at the Whitney.
Right. And it looks like modernist painting.
Yeah. That was I remember walking through that show and I said, oh, I can be a professional art quilter. That's what I'm going to do, just like them. It was only years later that I found that they weren't living that life. But that perception for children, and I was a young woman, not a child, but it's the perception. Yes, we want our elders to succeed, but if the younger ones coming up believe that by seeing you, it was enough for me.
So where did we go from this somewhat personal trajectory?
Yes, so these are two images. Let me see, on the right side is another portrait I did in class of my father's father, who I never met. He died of appendicitis years ago in Ghana, somewhere around 1945. So that loss resonated. And I wanted to create a portrait of him, but I didn't have a photo.
Okay.
So I just looked up what might he look like.
Okay. That is a big part of what you do. I mean, we talked about this aspect of painting as being a way of talking through the work, but photography plays almost a crucial role in all of the work. So how do you, at this point, is everything based off of photography?
Yeah, they are. I mean, this was based on, I just looked up a photo of a man from northern Ghana. I was looking for a photo of an older man. So on the right and on the left is based on the same photo, but they're 1 year apart. So you see how I was sort of understanding how to use the fabric, how to bring out the features, how to emphasize, where do I want to use flat, where do I want to use pattern. So these are based on the same photo, but within that year, I was able to work out something.
How are you sourcing the textiles at this point, or the material at this point?
I was still in the scrap territory, my father's old dashikis, but my father's dashiki smelled like him.
Right.
His
so
cologne.
Soft, personal.
Yes, and they were softer, and they were older, and they were prints from the 60s. So at that time, I was sort of working through that philosophy. Make a portrait of somebody made out of what their life was like, so that you can have an idea. I don't need to tell you that this man is African.
Right.
You could see his features, but you see by the fabric. We all respond to this. So we know what that, I don't need to write at the bottom, African man. You can see it.
And something different happens, if I'm not...
Yes, something different happens.
How do we go? How do we go here? Because this brings up the question of color in such a demonstrative way, which I think is something you've become incredibly known for.
I mean, we just jumped 15 years.
Oh.
So, yes. And I know I put this in here.
But that's important, though, because,
yes.
you know, we can get to it a little bit, but the last 2 years have been kind of momentous in all of our lives, but I would say in your life in a very big way.
Yes.
You did mention teaching.
Yeah.
So you were making work and teaching for...
I was making work, teaching, working after school, on the weekends, summer holidays, and I had 2 little daughters. My husband, Johnny, is here. Raise your hand, John. And it's very important that you see this man because he was the one taking the kids to the park and keeping them occupied and telling them mommy's working. But quilting was something I could do as a teacher and a parent. At my lunch hour, I could have like something on my desk and the kids could look. These are portraits of my niece, Anaya, on the right, and then one of my friends, Fiona, on the left. And when I first started thinking about what would I like to portray as a professional artist, I went back to my roots, who's around me? Who are the people who I love?
Well, what made you say as a professional artist? Like, what was that point?
That, I shouldn't have said that. I meant to say I was professional before, but as an artist who was no longer a teacher.
Okay.
Because for a long time I taught and made art, and I could sell my artwork with galleries who supported me. Mm-hmm. And they realized that I wasn't going to be able to give a whole lot of art. Mm-hmm. I'm not going to say it wasn't taken as seriously, because for them it was, but I was still like in school. Mm-hmm. So I had like Hearn Fine Art in Little Rock, Thelma Harris Fine Art in Oakland, and Richard Beaver's gallery in Brooklyn. Mm-hmm. Smaller Black-owned galleries were helping me. They helped me, and they helped me start to gain an audience. And then when I quit teaching, I was working with a more mainstream art gallery, and so I already had an audience who followed me and supported me, and then it just multiplied at that point. Mm.
So this is around what time that you would say this became professional?
2017.
Okay. So
it's been a short time between quitting teaching and now.
Yeah. And these 2 works are from that period, 2017?
These are from 2017 and 2018.
Amazing.
Yeah. And by this point, when I quit teaching, I was just going ham. I was like, I'm not... Because I'm only making this for me. It wasn't necessarily made to be sold. I don't know if somebody's going to buy it. Right. These are the colors that I want to use. These are the colors that I like. And I felt like I described it somehow, like I felt like a tiger in a cage. Mm-hmm. I was always pacing, like I want to do this. When I have a chance, I'm going to do this. And then I finally was there. And I was like, okay, now I had to show and prove. What is it that you're going to do? And I was like, well, I want all of the colors. I want no constraints. It's just 100% what I feel like doing. So that's what you're seeing here.
The image on the right is the cover of your portraits book.
Yes.
So just tell us a little bit about the significance of that piece in particular, and is it a jump off of sorts from the other one?
It is my girlfriend, Fiona. She's a mother of 5. She was a nurse, worked all through the COVID period. And this is her photo, her last school photo before she left Jamaica and came to the U.S. And she had a very solemn little look on her face because she was getting ready to leave everything that she knew and loved. No more warm, beautiful island. No more Miami temperatures. No more blue water. No more acceptance for her accent. No more, like, this is the 80s. It wasn't cool at that time to admit that you were not American, but as soon as she spoke, you knew right away. Even black kids were not interested in hanging out with the foreign kid. So she was leaving everything and going to a place where she was not welcome.
Let's move to the next image. So I want to talk a little bit more about color.
Yes. So this is me hamming it up again. I love color. I grew up in the 70s, so I want all of it all the time.
So you had that personal kind of attraction to it.
Yes.
But then also I always find it amazing the ability to, you're depicting very specific characters, right? And we look at them, and as you said, like, this is a black person. This is a man from Ghana. This is that. And there's no denying that. And yet, you know, that person could be blue, right? Yellow.
Yeah.
How did you, was there a sense of possibility in color that didn't exist from, say, the black and white photographs that you might have found inspiration in?
Absolutely. I'm glad you asked that, because I love black and white photos because they allow us to put our own color in. So I'm not going to get stuck on your eyes are brown, your hair is dark brown. I'm not even on that. I'm on what else do I think about this person. And I think my quilts, in a way, would be like if you took a color photo and saturated, turn up all the color really intensely. I want to say something about the inner workings of the person. And I'm still that student of these Afro-Cobra professors who are like, what do you have to say about the black family? What do you have to say about black love, about black couples? The portrait of the family, originally the black and white photo, the father's not in the portrait. The family was sitting on steps, and the father worked at one of those pine tar plantations. So he was gone. And it said, the caption said, father makes, I think, $1.75 a week. The children didn't have shoes, neither did the mother, but they had gold jewelry. So that was there. I could have created the piece just like that, but without the father there. Coincidentally, at the same time, one of my friends who is not black asked me she said something that she had heard, why are 90% of black children born without their fathers present? And I was like, well, where'd you get that? Did they interview everyone? How's that possible?
Right.
But that perception, because now I'm making work for a wider audience, not just black people, all people. Yeah. So I thought, I can't put this portrait out here without Dad, because now he's struggling. This man worked hard all his life. Those camps were like plantations. He wasn't even free. But if I don't put him in here, it's like he wasn't doing it and he didn't exist. So I had to find a portrait of a father and put him in there. And if you notice, like, his feet are below. He's holding his family up. Yeah. He's supporting his family. And me and my siblings, when my parents split, we lived with my father. He supported us and supported my mother after they split. He was that bedrock. So I'm like, my perception is that black fathers love and care for their children, and I'm going to demonstrate this in the artwork. Right. And then the couple. Sorry. Thank you.
The other thing that becomes so prominent and apparent at this point is the actual usage of specific textile.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Batik,
Yes.
You mentioned wax prints from
Right.
not only the Dutch wax prints, but Ghanaian wax prints.
Ghanaian wax prints, Nigerian tie-dye. I want kente cloth. I want South African shwe shwe. Because these people are of African descent. We know that. But at the time, our heritage was stripped. So even when I was a little girl, when I mentioned my friend being Jamaican, but me being half Ghanaian, if I told people I was African, they would be like, "Ugh."
Sure.
It was a thing of shame if all you knew of Africa was Tarzan. So I want our people to have that pride. This is your fabric. It belongs to you. It was made for you. And then the fabrics that I'm using, I want them to tell the story. In the family, mom's apron, you may not be able to see it very well, but there is lemonade on there.
Okay.
So that's a nod to our dear Beyonce. And her grandmother, I think her husband's grandmother said, you know, when life gives you lemons, you make lemonade. So I put those things in there for us as nods, but I'm also using specific African prints to say something about them.
And in effect, creating a sort of umbilical cord of sorts.
Yes. Tie them back. Yep. That's back to Afro-Cobra again, acknowledging you're American, and yes, you are African. Your roots go beyond this plantation. You did not just sprout out of South Carolina. You have a legacy that goes back thousands and thousands of years, and I want them to be proud, and I want people to see our people the way I see them.
Right.
Somebody asked once, why do you make everyone look like so regal? What are you trying to say? And I was like, did you see the photo? I didn't make them look regal. I see them the way I see them. You see them in a different way. So the question is, why do you see them like that?
Right. Amazing. Let's move to the next image. And I think it's important in the context of, let's see, you mentioned certain galleries. You had a reception. You had a market of sorts. Yes, you may have still needed to hold on to your teaching position at that point, but you were doing your thing.
Yeah.
You opened up into bigger galleries, which then provided a bigger platform.
Yes.
2020, right? You had your first museum survey.
Yes.
Tell us about
the Art Institute
that.
of Chicago. So should I go to
well,
the
it
next
opened
photo?
first in Katona, right?
Oh, it opened at the Katona Museum in upstate New York. And
When did it open?
It was supposed to open, I think it was March. So
We
all know what happened in March.
The day of COVID.
Yes.
It was March 15th.
Yes, that's right, because New York had shut down. I think it was March 15th.
Yeah.
So that was the day the lockdown began. So the show opened and closed on the same day.
How do you feel? This is your first museum survey.
I didn't even. We all thought it was going to be just a few weeks. So I figured 2 weeks, and then we'll have the opening.
Yeah.
And I'm going to go to that.
Okay.
Oh, should I go to the?
Go.
Yeah. So this is my opening at the Art Institute of Chicago. So this was the second leg. And that was pretty cool. But I think it's looking a little barren. Yes, because it opened in November, and then Chicago went on lockdown. 3 days later? Something like that.
It was a crazy period.
It was a really interesting period of time. But I felt so supported there. From the moment I walked in, a woman approached me. Her name was Darlene, and she had about 40 of my catalogs. And she said all of the security guards had bought these books. Wow. And they weren't supposed to speak to me during hours when guests were in the museum because they wanted security to be securing, I suppose. So we had to go like in this little alcove so that I could sign all the books for the security guards. And then by the end of the day, all of those books were sold. And that was from the people in the museum saying, like, I don't usually come up to this gallery, but I wanted to meet you and I wanted to get my book signed.
Wow. It's hard, and I think in retrospect, but so, of course, shortly after the exhibition was supposed to open, Breonna, George Floyd, this is all in the same moment.
Yes.
You've spoken repeatedly about the necessity of the artist to play a role in society. How do you, I just, a little bit more about how you deal with 2020.
That was so heavy. And I, like everyone else, needed healing. It was traumatic, right, for all of us watching those scenes on the TV over and over and over. And so more than ever, I was associating my artwork, the struggle that we had as sharecroppers, the struggle that we had in the 60s is the same struggle that we have now for recognition, not just liberation, but the right to walk down the street with your hood up, the right to drive in a neighborhood that you want to drive in, the right to sleep in your bed unmolested. So I started just speaking out more, like, you cannot take one and not the other. If you look at my artwork, the struggle is still the same. And I wanted people to understand this portrait of a young man or young woman is no different than young Trayvon or George Floyd or Breonna Taylor. So you can't respect one and not the living, breathing human being.
We've seen many images of that had a personal connection, but yet an image like the one.
This?
Yeah.
Okay.
The historical figures. There's an interesting, I think, dialogue between the well-known historical figure and then these portraits that you don't even, in some cases, I think, don't even know the whole history, and you're finding out more and more as you go along.
Right.
This is not that case, of course.
This is not that case. The Harriet Tubman, I think this carte de visite was found or maybe brought to auction in 2018. So we're looking at a new image of Harriet, finally, young Harriet. And I was so curious. I'm always curious about the inner workings. We know about her being an abolitionist and a bringer of freedom and a spy for the North and a feminist. But what was she like? What was she really like? What did she sound like? What was it like to be in her presence? So when I found the carte de visite of Harriet Tubman, by the way, this was a commission by the National Museum of African American History and Culture. Let me not
That's a big one.
forget to say that. But I wanted to put something there that I discovered by looking at it. Harriet's hair, how meticulous it was. She was about 40 in this photo. Her beautiful clothing with the tiny pin tucks and the thousands of buttons, or not thousands, but it felt like thousands as I worked on it. Her hands, look at your hands, tell so much. I was just staring at it, thinking about what I thought her hands would look rougher after what she had been through. But no, it was a woman who I was looking at.
There's you see it in all of the work, but there's a real complexity to background and relationship to foreground. The diversity of color that you're getting, and even just in the face alone. One thing I forgot to ask was, how in the world do you do what you do? Like, what kind of machine are you using here?
I mean, the longest thing when you mentioned the diversity of color is choosing what to what. Why are you using this color? I'm looking at a black and white photo.
Right.
So I start by drawing right on top of a photocopy of the photo itself. And that sketch is just in a Sharpie. But that's exactly what dressmakers do. And my mother and my grandmother make clothing. So I'm essentially making a pattern for myself. And I'm layering fabric. So in this image, the first layer of Harriet Tubman's face was just red.
Okay.
And everything else was layered on top of it. So I'm acting not like a jigsaw puzzle, but like a painter laying the ground. And then instead of glazes, I'm putting sheer bits of fabric on top, building out her face. But I was thinking about Harriet being this like firebrand who carried this gun and said like, be free, or I think it was die, right? Something like, you weren't turning back. With Harriet, you're going. And then the other part of that, traveling at night by only the stars. If any of you watch Cynthia Erivo in her movie Harriet, and if you've ever been on a country road at night, like imagine being there in the dark and having nothing but God to guide you. So the sunflowers behind her, I read that sunflowers are thought of as a devotional flower. And it's also the sun is a star. So that's like a nod to the North Star as her guiding light, and how she said God guided her. And they call the sunflower that because as the sun moves, the sunflower always has its head up to God or up to its sun. So that's a nod to Harriet running at night, her Christianity, her African heritage, and the North Star itself in the sky.
Amazing. And also one of those, you're being asked to make specific works at this point, right? And that, I think it was Time magazine.
Yes.
Essence, everybody's probably seen the Essence cover.
Yeah, I'll go to it.
New York Times magazine most recently.
Oh, I can't.
I know. You don't.
Wait, I'll have to come back.
We'll go back.
Okay. So New York Times and Essence, and I did 2 Time covers in 2020 and maybe 2021.
Yeah. I mean, how does that go, with the practice? You have things, and you have, I would assume, an archive of photographs that you have in mind that you're working through.
Yes.
And then there are also these other opportunities.
There's these things that I just have to do.
Yeah.
When I was given the opportunity to do the Time covers, one is Wangari Maathai, the first African woman to win the Nobel Peace Prize, and the other is Portia Bennett Bay, not as well known, but an activist from Kenosha, who really just stood up when Jacob Blake was shot. And I felt like I have to do this. This is essentially what it is. Why am I here? What is this artwork for? Even though I had other big commissions, the essence of why I make art is for my people, the people. And so I loved when the introduction was the Perez Museum, the Museum of the People, because it's so important. So these covers were very important to me. Yes, they were assignments, but they meant everything to me to be able to do a cover for Essence magazine or the New York Times magazine.
An incredible vehicle for spreading those ideas.
Absolutely.
Let's go back for a second. And we'll move to questions in a minute, but I just want to... Okay. This is the cover of the group exhibition at the MFA Boston.
Yes. That's MFA Boston. The flags outside had the portrait was a group of Morris Brown baseball players from 1899. So when I saw those baseball players, I was like, there's no way, how do I just skip past this?
Right.
1899, they couldn't vote.
Right.
They couldn't sit in the front of the bus. They couldn't live in certain neighborhoods. They couldn't go to certain schools. Yet they want to play baseball. They are American, and they're claiming that. And they were so fly and so strong and so beautiful that you're not going to deny them their humanity. So I had to do that piece.
And then, of course,
our Chadwick Boseman.
Yeah.
I had to do that. I feel like that a lot when I said I had to.
Yeah.
Chadwick Boseman, another graduate of Howard University, School of Fine Arts. We were there at the same time, but I was a senior while he was a freshman. His ideals and what he stood for and what he wouldn't take, roles. Mm-hmm. He didn't have his breakout role until he was 40. Right? Because he refused to allow himself to be demeaned. And in that essence, it's not just him who's demeaned. On the TV, every black person who sees him playing the role of some like junkie or some kind of criminal hurts the people who are watching it. So he wouldn't take those roles because it hurt the people. And I really admire the way he lived his life, and I had to make this piece as an homage to him.
So beautiful. And thank you for bringing this image.
Yes. The original. I wanted to show the photo inspiration for my piece.
Did you take this picture? Or did someone
I did not take this picture. I am not a photographer. Yeah. But Trevor is. Now, I don't know if he set it up and he had a tripod or if somebody else, but Trevor Sturman is a young photographer from South Africa, and he's a global citizen. He's a stylist. He's worked with Beyonce on her Black is King mini movie. I don't even want to reduce it to a video.
That was a film.
Film. And Trevor, his global sensibilities, the way he moves through the world and represents South Africa, represents Black pride, represents elegance and grace and fashion. I thought, I have to do this piece. And this piece being one of the first ones I was doing of somebody who was living, happened because we were all trapped at home. And I was on the screen looking just like everyone else. Yeah. And I was like, this history is now. It's happening right in front of our very eyes. So I thought, let me start making some portraits of people who are doing things now.
Yeah. I mean, his Instagram is also one in which you see a lot of his stylings.
Yeah.
I was kind of shocked to see this image and see that it was so absent of color, and then you did what you do.
Yeah. Yes. I think, you know what, I didn't even notice that I did use a color photo for once, but he was wearing a white suit. And now that you mention it, my portrait of Chadwick Boseman, he was also wearing all white.
Wow.
Because I want to say something about the person, and I don't need the actual colors to help me say that.
Exactly. Let's just see a couple of details of that.
And I wanted to say, first of all, Trevor Sturman, him being global, I wanted those airplanes on his pants so that you could see. And then on his other pants leg, you see the little bird. That fabric is called Speedbird, but it represents wealth and prosperity. But it's also how wealth can be here today and gone tomorrow. Right on. So it's this changing society, even as we are moving to different types of currency. Mm-hmm. And I had to have his Nikes in there. Mm-hmm. There was no way that I could not have that, but I wanted to use, in his piece, I was using more contemporary fabrics. Mm-hmm. The bright fabric behind him.
Yeah, that green.
Is a very fashion-forward fabric, and I wanted to combine that, the European fabrics with the African fabrics, to say something about how he moves through this world.
Wow. We are so lucky. Thank you.
Thank you.
And we can want to end here? Or
yeah, we can end here. working, well, I just finished.
You finished this piece?
Finished a piece for the Smithsonian, the Renway. Thank you. And again, if you were turning pages in a book, you're going to stop and be like, who are these guys?
Right.
Who are these fly guys? Assuming I looked at it like everyone else, must be the Tuskegee Airmen.
Right.
And then I read Harlem Hellfighters. I'm like, what is this about? Yeah. They are so bad and so powerful and brave. What you're looking at is young men on board the USS Stockholm, 1919, coming into New York Harbor. They just finished fighting in Paris. They've won the war, the longest serving unit out of any, with most casualties. The Germans called them the Harlem Kampfer, the Hellfighters, because before that, the black soldiers were told to dig trenches, lay railroad tracks, cart away dead bodies. They wanted action, and the white American soldiers refused to fight alongside the black soldiers, but the French said, we'll take them. So the U.S. loans them out to the French, and they did the thing, okay? That's where they got the Harlem Kampfer, the Hellfighters, because imagine being young and fierce. You volunteered to fight, to defend a country that doesn't respect you. So you have something to prove. You want to be accepted as a man, as an equal. The white American soldiers, they had also been hoodwinked. They thought that blacks didn't have the intellectual capacity to make decisions in battle. So you can't fight next to that person. And they did the thing. This is them coming into New York Harbor. They're getting ready to march down Fifth Avenue for the first time to black and white audiences. And I had to.
And we see.
I had to. And I just want to say one last thing. They got the Croix de Guerre from the French military, which is a high honor for valor, back in 1919. So they're all wearing their medals, but they did not get their U.S. Congressional Gold Medal until this past September.
Right.
So 100 years later.
And you blessed us with this.
Oh, I just wanted you to see how big it was. And there's Hellfighters with the French, and this is them marching down Fifth Avenue.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Take a couple questions?
Of course, of course.
Please wait for a mic if you have a question so we can catch it for our online audience. We're going to try to tackle both sides. Sorry, raise your hand one more time down here. Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
It was amazing, really, really wonderful. I'm curious about the way that you depict the facial features and particularly the colors. Are you using paint and layering paint on fabric and then applying individual layers of the paint, the fabric that has been painted? I'm just
no paint.
No
Zero.
paint.
No.
It's still unbelievable
No
after.
paint.
Yeah, could you say that again?
No. That became a personal challenge for
Yes.
me. Because, like I mentioned, my grandmother, she had passed. And like anybody else who sews or knows, there's so much left behind. Actually, not just someone who sews, all of us, if you have a loved one who's passed, all their things. I felt compelled. I had to use it. It was enough. I didn't need anything else. I already had it.
I mean, it's just amazing. Really
Thank you.
Beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your work. It's really profound. And I just feel like you talk about representing the culture and the identity in a way that needs to be permeated in our society. But for those who were not privileged to see and experience the exhibition in Chicago, I feel like we really would love it if you would speak to the soundtrack, because that is such it changed the meaning of every piece. And so we did the round twice, and we tried not to disrupt everybody, and then we went home and looked at the pictures. But if you could talk about that and about your husband's role and the importance of bringing those two components together for identity and representation.
Absolutely. Thank you for saying that and asking that. The soundtrack, well, I'm always envious of musicians, first of all, because their tool, it's so universal. You know, you can control somebody's emotion and tell them exactly how you feel. You can write how you feel, but when you listen to music, you feel what they feel. And so my husband, being a DJ, I met him at Howard University. He was a big DJ on campus. And I was a little quiet art girl trying to get him to pay attention to me at the parties. And so we've had music in our lives ever since. And me and him will just be listening to the radio in the morning and listening to songs. And one day we were listening to a song by Nasir Jones, a rapper out of New York. And he had this build-up. But Nas's production is like, I don't know if it was Beethoven or what, but he had classical music introduction building to this huge crescendo. And then his rap lyrics were so like staccato that my heart was beating along. He was controlling. And I was like, to John, I was like, I want my art to affect people like this song affects people. And so I almost felt like I was cheating with the soundtrack, because there's only how long can the card be along the artwork? And then also I want people to have their own experiences. I don't want to just say, this is what I say it is. But music puts you in the emotion of something that I can't say. It's still up on Spotify, yeah. Thank you. And John helped me with each song. It took us at least maybe a couple months just going through music. I would tell him, I would say, I want this piece to feel proud but somber. And then I'm vague like that. So, and he just presents music to me one after the other. No. And then like we're slowly getting towards the root of what I feel this piece should sound like. Thank you.
I'd love to know more about the fabrics you use. Have you been collecting them over a period of time? How do you source them? Do you have a big library? And do you make your own clothes? Because your dress is great.
Thank you. Well, this dress was made by my friend Ruben Ruel, a designer out of New York. His line is called Domestic, if anyone looks it up. But I get my fabric mostly now. I order it. There are a lot of fabrics that I use. This one is Dutch wax, and it's made in Holland still. The Dutch, as we know, are shrewd business people, and they, way back in the 18-somethings, decided that they wanted to imitate Indian batiks, but the Indian customers weren't feeling it. They're like, yours doesn't look good enough. And then during World War I, a lot of the African soldiers liked that fabric, and they brought it home to Africa, and the African public loved it. They like the imperfections. They like the bleed over of the colors. And they've been making it ever since. So I order a lot of fabric from Flisco, a company in Holland. I order fabric from Ghana directly, Nigeria directly, South Africa. The world is so global now. Before, I used to have my aunties bring something back when they came back and forth between Ghana and the Cote d'Ivoire. Well, now I can just order it. And I shop at local fabric shops. I live very close to New York, so the garment district is there, and I just walk up and down those streets, just grabbing whatever strikes me.
Hi. Thank you so much. I'm over here in the corner. So thank you so much. I had the blessed privilege of being able to see the work in Chicago, and I don't really go to museums like that. Probably not the best place to say that. But I remember being so absolutely captivated by all of the work. There were some pieces in particular that were just breathtaking and brought me to tears, even without the music. And one of the things I was wondering, and forgive me if I don't know this, but there were so many intricate symbols embedded in each piece, whether it was a peacock or the speed bird.
Yeah.
Do you have a combination of writing besides the book that was up there that explains what those symbols mean that we can all reach and connect to in ways that we may not have connected to before? When I say moved, child, I mean tears. I was like, oh my God. Particularly the one with the 4 girls and the 4 women.
Yes.
Just absolutely astounding.
Now that you mention it, though, there hasn't been enough writing on that decoding of African symbols. The Nigerian fabric, the Adire, there's a gallerist and artist in Nigeria called, they call her Queen Nike, but it's spelled like Nike, Nike. And she produced a beautiful book decoding the signs and symbols of that art. But the Dutch wax, and I don't want to mispronounce her name, but a woman named Anne Grossville, she's English, wrote a book that talks about some of them, but not all of them. There's not like this encyclopedia with all of it. No, I don't think it exists. So I think it should, though. Not necessarily for me to write it, though, but somebody who wants to travel in Africa and just catalog that, all of these names. And we as African women, they're so funny with the names. For the companies make the fabric, and then it goes to the marketplace, and like this fabric, I think they call it Rolls Royce. Why? I don't know. But some of them have very there's this one fabric, my husband always, it's terrible. It's called Men Are Not Loyal. Like, I would ask why, but I should ask the men, why? And when I read those names, I'm like, why are we like this? So the fabric is great because it allows me to express what I want to say about this piece. Like that piece with the family, I would never put Men Are Not Loyal in that fabric. But if I do, I want the African connoisseurs, they know what it is. So it's like a secret message, too.
Could we take a few questions from YouTube just as we're taking one more from the crowd? Alina on YouTube says, one art class changed your life forever. What are your thoughts on contemporary visual art education, and what are your recommendations for visual art teachers today?
Wait, one more time? I'm sorry.
Sorry. I read it fast.
That was good.
What are your thoughts on contemporary visual art education, and what are your recommendations for visual arts teachers today?
I think art education is so important, first of all. Creative thought, thinking outside the box, giving somebody something and say, just make it. Make what you want. For my students, little ones, if you give a 3-year-old a blank sheet of paper, they're so excited, they're scribbling, they're doing what they want. But if you give high school kids all a blank sheet of paper and say draw, they get furious. What? what do you want me to draw? Well, what is it? I'm just going to write my name. But something has happened in that period of time where they no longer felt free. And I think it's really important that we allow our students to explore and to experiment. And I wish there were more classes like that. This is just experimental studio. Give them things and just tell them to make it. And you could judge it or critique it, I should say, based on the effort, the time, the creativity, but not like if you like it or you don't like it.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And we'll just take one more from YouTube for all of our viewers out there on the interwebs with us. Ito Vina says, to me, we find in your work the strongest possible refutation of the dehumanizing images of Black people so prominent in U.S. history. Could you comment on how you see your work doing this?
Absolutely. For me, as a little dark-skinned girl who had roots in Ghana and New Orleans, watching TV in the 80s, we all know it's pretty rough. I remember like this CoverGirl commercial was Christy Brinkley, who was very beautiful. But at the end of the commercial, she says, like, she's looking at her face and she's like, because I'm worth it. And then like clicks the compact close. And I remember watching that and wondering, as a little kid, like, am I worth it? I look nothing like her. And all the images that I saw, especially of Africans, when I mentioned Tarzan, that was about it. But some of the images that we see, they're so harmful and destructive. And we think about it lightly, like even, let's say, the Smurfs, you know? But like Smurfette with her blonde hair, and she was pretty, but no little Afro-headed Smurfette. Like, it's just repeated over and over again. You are not the ideal. You are not the pretty one. You're not the smart one. You're not the good one. Like, if you look up, like, the doll test on YouTube for little Black children, even little kids, asking them, you know, who's the pretty doll? Who's the bad doll? Like, Black kids and white kids, they're not choosing the black doll or the brown doll. And it breaks my heart to see a little kid pick the black doll as the bad one. Little Black kid. It's so destructive. And I'm still that teacher. And so I feel like my artwork should be like when I was standing in front of a classroom, I remember that all the children are loved and their parents want the best for them. And I should not harm this child because I didn't have my coffee. Or I shouldn't say something mean to this child because I don't understand their gender. Or I don't feel like they took a shower that day. Or I feel like they should have combed their hair different. Or I don't like their religion. Like, all of that, you have to put it aside because you're there to nurture and to teach those children. So I feel like that with my artwork. No one should look at my artwork, should ever feel reduced or feel like they are not good or they're not beautiful.
Hi, Bisa. Thank you so much for sharing
hey.
with us your beautiful work.
Thank you.
I think it's amazing the way you sit here so calmly and talk about a subject such as racial relationships that is so difficult here in America, yet you're so calm and you're so true to your vision and your beliefs. As an artist at the height of your power, are there any ideal commissions that are in the back of your head or any portraits that you dream of creating one day?
Well, first of all, I'm not at the height yet. You know, I feel that way. I think about those. There's so many things that I want to do. And sometimes I hear those words in my head, you know, when Martin Luther King said, like, I may not get there with you, but I'm going to get there. I feel like I'm a part of this long continuum of Black artists who've been struggling for respect and representation and acknowledgement. And so I'm a part of that, and then I see the quilters, especially. Like, I would love to do portraits of the women of G-Span and honor them in that way, the nod back, thank you for what you have done along the continuum. All of our heroes I want to do, but and then just ordinary people. I love doing portraits of those people who were not acknowledged and not seen, and that I'm talking about in the past and now. All we have to do is look on the news. I would love to do, but I also don't want my artwork to feel sad. I don't want to say that, but I would love to do portraits of Trayvon Martin and Ahmaud Arbery and Breonna Taylor and Mike Brown, excuse me. The list is too long, but that's always in my head. I need more time to do all the things that I want to do.
Thank you. I think we all could ask Bisa questions all night long, but we're going to ask that you meet us outside on the terrace for some music by DJ John Butler, and you can ask your questions out there. Thank you so much, Bisa.
Bisa, thank you.